My mother always said the Callaway name meant something. She repeated it at every dinner, every holiday, every family gathering where my brother got to stand in the center of the room while I stood near the kitchen door pretending to study the wallpaper. The Callaway name meant something, and what it meant, apparently, was that some of us belonged to it more than others. I drove myself to my brother's housewarming in a rented Camry. Not because I couldn't afford better, because I'd learned a long time ago that the car you arrive in tells people a story before you open your mouth, and I had become very particular about which stories I let other people tell. The house was in Westchester. My brother Adrian had been talking about it for 6 months, a 4-bedroom colonial on almost an acre, stone driveway, original hardwood floors, wraparound porch. My father had quietly arranged the down payment through a private LLC he'd set up for Adrian 2 years before. I knew because I had seen the documents once, by accident, during a visit home when my father left his laptop open on the kitchen table. He had not offered me the same arrangement when I was 28 and trying to close on my first commercial property in Philadelphia. He had told me real estate was a risky game and that he didn't throw money at risks. I arrived at 8:15, which was late enough to avoid the excited arrivals and early enough to witness whatever the night had planned. The house looked exactly like I expected it to. Spotlit from below, a catering van parked discreetly on the side street. Guests in business casual clustered near the porch railing with glasses of Bordeaux. My brother had done well, or rather, a combination of my father's money and a housing market that had spent the last 5 years rewarding everyone who got in early had done well for my brother. The distinction mattered to me more than it mattered to anyone else at that party. I recognized my Aunt Helen immediately, stationed near the front steps with a champagne flute and the expression she wore when she was performing graciousness. She saw me and her face arranged itself into something that was technically a smile. "Lily," she said, "we weren't sure you were coming." I told her traffic on I-95 was brutal, which was true. She nodded the way people do when they aren't listening and said Adrian would be so glad I made it. I did not tell her that Adrian had not personally called me to invite me. The invitation had come through my mother, delivered as a text, the message forwarded from a group chat I had been left out of until my mother copied me in at the last minute. My mother found me 20 minutes later, near the back of the living room where the catering staff were refilling the shrimp cocktail. She looked good. She had the particular glow of a woman who was having an excellent evening, and I understood without being told that the excellent evening was built on something that did not include me. "You look tired," she said, which was her version of a greeting when she wasn't pleased about something. I told her I was fine. "You should eat something. The food here is wonderful. Adrian had the most incredible caterer." She said his name the way she always did at parties, slightly louder than necessary, pitched to carry, so that anyone nearby would know which son she was talking about and why. My father appeared at her shoulder. He was wearing the blazer he kept for occasions when he wanted to look like old money without spending new money, and he had the expression he wore when he felt the evening was going according to plan. He looked at me and said, "Lily," the same way he said it when I was 17 and had brought home a B+ in calculus, like something slightly below expectation that he had decided to be patient about. "Glad you made it," he said. He did not ask how the drive was. He looked past me at a couple near the fireplace and raised his hand in a greeting, already moving away. "Get yourself a drink. There's a full bar set up in the dining room." That was it. That was my welcome. I got myself a drink and stood near the window that looked out onto the backyard, where string lights were threaded through the oak tree branches, and a small group of my brother's college friends were laughing about something near the fire pit. My brother was at the center of it in the way he always was, relaxed, unrehearsed, the kind of comfortable that comes from never having had to wonder whether you belong somewhere. He saw me through the glass. He raised his beer bottle in my direction. That was also it. I had been standing at that window for 10 minutes when one of my father's golf friends, a man named Kenneth, with the permanent tan of someone who spends winters in Scottsdale, materialized beside me and asked if I was visiting from out of town. "I live in Philadelphia," I said. "Oh, so you're local. What do you do down there?" Before I could answer, my father appeared again. I had not heard him approach. He had that quality of arriving at precisely the wrong moment and said, "Lily works in property management, don't you?" Sweetheart. The word sweetheart landed with the precision of a thumbtack. Small-scale stuff, residential, nothing too complicated. Kenneth nodded with the mild interest of a man who found this adequately explained. Property management. I had not worked in property management since I was 24 years old and managing a 12-unit building in South Philly to pay my own rent while I saved to buy my first property outright. That had been 10 years ago. My father knew this. He had known it for years and continued to describe my work this way because it cost him nothing and it arranged me neatly at the level where he needed me to stay. I opened my mouth to correct him. "She's always been practical," my mother said, appearing on my other side with the timing of someone who had done this before, which she had at every gathering for the last decade. Not everyone has Adrian's vision. Lily has always been more comfortable with what she has. She patted my arm. The pat was gentle. The sentence was not. Kenneth said something about how that was just fine, different paths for different people, and excused himself for the bar. I stood very still. I had two choices in this moment, and I had been making them at every family gathering since my late 20s. I could correct the record, say something clear and direct about what I actually did, how much I had built, what my portfolio looked like as of the last quarterly review, and watch my parents redirect the conversation within 30 seconds while later describing me to their friends as difficult, oversensitive, always trying to one-up her brother. Or I could say nothing, let the false version of me circulate through this party like a rumor, and wait. I had gotten very good at waiting. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Dana, my business partner and the person who had managed every operational detail of what we built together since we incorporated 7 years ago, had a habit of texting at the precise moment I most needed to be somewhere else mentally. "Whitmore is asking for confirmation by 10 p.m. They will not wait past midnight. This one is real, Lily. The Whitmore deal was 14 months in the making. A mixed-use development outside Nashville, retail on the ground floor, 42 residential units above, a rooftop situation that the architect had spent 6 weeks perfecting. The investors were serious people, the kind of serious where the offer letters were reviewed by 3 different attorneys before anything was signed. Dana and I had been working toward this closing for over a year, and the number at the top of the agreement had 8 digits in front of the decimal point. I put the phone back in my clutch. My brother appeared at my side with a fresh beer and a loose smile he wore when he was genuinely happy, which he was most of the time, and I did not begrudge him that, not really. "Hey, you," he said. "I'm glad you came. I meant to call." "You should have called," I said. He looked slightly chastened. "I know, Mum said she texted you." "She did." We stood there for a moment in the particular silence of siblings who grew up in the same house and emerged as strangers. He was not a bad person, my brother. He had simply never had to make a single decision about who he was because every decision had been made for him by parents who found it easier to pour everything into one child and explain away the other. He had accepted this arrangement with the unconscious ease of someone who had never been asked to question it. "The house looks great," I said, because it did. "Thanks. It needs work, but..." He shrugged and looked at the ceiling with the pride of a man who had not laid a single strip of the original hardwood under his feet. "I love it." My father found me again 40 minutes later, near the dining room where a cluster of his banking colleagues had gathered. He was telling a story about Adrian's closing process, some anecdote about the inspection report and a disagreement with the sellers, and he told it with the energy of a man describing a battle he himself had fought. Several people in the group were listening with the deferential attention they reserved for Harold Calloway, who had spent 35 years in commercial banking and had opinions about everything. He noticed me at the edge of the group, and here, he said with the ease of someone making an introduction at a cocktail party, is our other one. He said it exactly like that, our other one. Not my daughter, not Lily, our other one, the category for things that existed but did not require specification. The group looked at me with the polite curiosity of people who have just been told a fact that they're expected to find adequate. "Do you work in finance as well?" a woman in a green dress asked. She meant it kindly. Property, my father said, answering for me. She manages some rentals. He smiled. The smile was impenetrable. I had spent years trying to find a crack in it and had never succeeded. I said, very evenly, I'm in commercial real estate development. My father's smile did not change. She has a few small projects, he said, redirecting, his voice smoothing over mine like water over a stone. But she's never been interested in the larger market. Some people prefer to keep things manageable. He looked at me with an expression of perfect, weaponized affection. You've always been sensible about not overextending yourself, haven't you, sweetheart? The woman in the green dress nodded as though this had been an answer. I could feel my phone buzzing again in my clutch. I did not reach for it. Later, I would calculate that I made the decision to stay at that party at a cost of approximately $11,000 in negotiating leverage on the Whitmore deal. Dana handled it. She was better at the hard close than I was anyway, and I had told her so many times. But there was a version of that evening where I walked out to the Camry and drove back to Philadelphia and let my family believe whatever they wanted to believe about who I was and what I was worth, and in that version I would have been fine. The Whitmore deal would have closed at the terms we wanted instead of the slightly less favourable terms Dana settled for at 11:47 that night. I stayed because I had heard something 20 minutes earlier from a catering staff member speaking quietly on the phone near the side door where the coats were kept. Ms. Vance confirmed. She's running about 15 minutes behind. The name meant nothing to anyone else at that party. To me it landed like a key turning in a lock I'd been waiting to open all evening. Audrey Vance was the founding partner of Vance Meridian Group, a boutique real estate firm out of New York that specialized in exactly the kind of transaction no one at this party had ever been in the room for. She did not attend parties she was not already connected to. She did not appear at someone's Westchester housewarming by coincidence. I refreshed my champagne and waited. My father gave a short speech at 9:30. He stood near the staircase and raised his glass and talked about hard work and vision and the Callaway legacy, and he meant every word of it, which was the part that had always been hardest for me. He was not performing love for my brother, he genuinely felt it. The thing about my father that I had taken years to understand was that his treatment of me was not malice, it was simply the way he had organized his world. One child was the investment, the other was the footnote, and he had never found a reason to reorganize it. He did not mention me in the speech. My mother dabbed her eyes with a folded cocktail napkin. My brother looked genuinely moved. Guests applauded. I stood near the doorway to the kitchen and watched it happen, and felt the particular emotional flatness that comes from having watched this same scene enough times that it no longer produces the sensation it was designed to produce. I had stopped waiting for my father to see me years ago. I had started building things instead. A black SUV pulled into the stone driveway at 9:47. I was the only one who registered it, because I was the only one who had been watching for it. She got out of the passenger side. Audrey Vance was in her early 50s, silver-haired, wearing what I recognized as a Loro Piana coat that cost more than my brother's monthly mortgage payment. She moved with the particular self-possession of someone who had never once wondered whether she had the right to be in a room. A driver stayed with the car. My father, to his credit, noticed her within 90 seconds of her entering the house. He had good instincts about power. It was one of the things I had inherited from him. He introduced himself with the confident handshake that had opened every room he'd walked into for 4 decades. Harold Callaway, welcome to my son's home. She accepted his hand with professional warmth. Audrey Vance, beautiful property. Her eyes moved around the room with a practitioner's assessment, not admiring, exactly, but cataloguing. Do you know Adrian? My father pressed. He was already calibrating her, trying to identify where she fit in the hierarchy. I know the area, she said. Good bones in these Westchester neighborhoods. She did not elaborate. She accepted a glass of water from a passing server and began making her way through the room with the measured pace of someone who was looking for something specific. My father watched her cross the room, and I watched my father. Something had shifted in his expression of uncertainty, a hairline crack. He was not accustomed to encountering people who declined to position themselves in relation to him. My brother intercepted her near the fireplace with the enthusiasm of a man who correctly sensed that she was important but did not know why. He launched into his house's provenance, the year it was built, the renovation plans, his thinking about the neighborhood's trajectory. He was charming in the way he had always been charming, effortlessly and without depth. Audrey Vance listened for perhaps 45 seconds, said lovely in a tone that conveyed the precise opposite of enthusiasm, and moved on. My brother stood near the fireplace, looking at the space where she had been, with an expression I had never seen on his face before. She found me by the bookshelf in the back hallway, where I had positioned myself with a clear line of sight to the front door. "Lily," she said, just my name with the ease of someone who has repeated it in professional contexts enough times that it costs nothing. Audrey. I hadn't seen her in 4 months, not since the conference in Chicago where we had shaken hands on the outline of something that would take another 18 months to fully structure. She looked at me for a moment with the particular expression she had, not warm, not cold, but deeply attentive. "You look exactly the same as the last time I saw you. How are you holding up?" "It's been a long evening," I said. She made a slight sound that acknowledged this without requiring elaboration. Then she turned and looked back at the room, at my father, who had rejoined his banking colleagues, but had not stopped tracking her movement through the space, at my mother, who had registered the exchange and was visibly recalculating something, at my brother, who was now pretending to examine a framed photo on the mantel while facing in our direction. "You could have told me this was a family event," Audrey said. "I needed you to see it," I said. She turned back to look at me. Something in her expression shifted almost imperceptibly into something that might have been respect. She had known me long enough to understand what I meant. She moved back into the main room. I stayed where I was and watched what happened next. The first conversation I observed was between Audrey and Kenneth, the golf-tout man from Scottsdale who had heard my father describe me as working in property management. They spoke for 7 minutes. I know it was 7 because I watched the clock on the kitchen wall. By the end of those 7 minutes, Kenneth's body language had undergone a visible transformation, the relaxed cocktail party posture replaced by the forward lean of a man who is paying very close attention. When their conversation ended, he looked around the room differently. His eyes landed on me and then slid away and then came back, slower. My father approached Audrey for a second time, more tentatively than the first. I could not hear the words from where I stood, but I could read the exchange. He was trying again to locate her on the map he used to organize people, and she was not cooperating. She answered his questions with the professional courtesy of someone who had done nothing wrong and intended to continue doing nothing wrong. My mother appeared at my father's side. I watched her ask him something. He shook his head slightly. She looked across the room at Audrey and then at me, and I watched the calculation happen on her face in real time, slow, effortful, arriving somewhere she did not want to be. Adrian made one more attempt. He brought her a glass of wine she had not asked for and resumed talking about the house. Audrey accepted the glass and said something brief that made him nod once and stop talking. She set the glass on the nearest surface and excused herself. I was aware that people were watching. Not everyone, but enough, the ones with good instincts, the ones who had noticed that this woman, who carried herself like a partner at something significant, had passed through every offered conversation at this party and paused at only one. A woman I had met earlier near the shrimp cocktail approached me with a completely different quality of attention than she had brought the first time. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't think I caught what you do. I'm sure I forgot." "I'm in development," I said. "Commercial, mixed use primarily, some institutional." She nodded in a way that suggested this answer had confirmed something she was already beginning to suspect. My father crossed the room to me. He was not walking the way he walked when he was winning. He was walking the way he walked when he needed information fast and had decided that directness was more efficient than performance. "Who is she?" he said, not a question. "She's a colleague," I said. He looked at me. The expression on his face was something I had never seen directed at me before. Not quite respect, not yet, but the precursor to it. The look a man gives when the map he has been using for 30 years has just revealed a territory it did not previously show. "What kind of colleague?" he said. The professional kind, I said. He stood there for a moment. I could see him trying to find the version of this where he maintained his authority over the narrative, and I could see him failing to find it. She works in real estate, I said. High-end, private transactions mostly. She doesn't usually come to events like this. He heard the implication. He was a smart man. He had always been a smart man, which was part of what had made this so difficult for so long. It would have been easier to forgive if he had been stupid. He opened his mouth and then closed it. My mother joined him. "What's going on?" she said, looking between us with the alert expression she wore when she sensed a loss of control but had not yet identified its source. "Nothing," I said. "It's a nice party." Audrey returned to the main room and stopped to speak with a man near the window. I recognized him as a city councilman from Yonkers who had attended with his wife. They shook hands. He said something with visible animation, and she listened and then said something back, and he laughed in the way people laugh when they have just been given information they find remarkable. The councilman looked toward me and then looked back at Audrey. I stayed exactly where I was. My father moved away from me. I watched him move through the room with less certainty than he had possessed an hour ago, and I watched the room receive him with a slightly different quality of attention, because groups of people are sensitive to these shifts in ways they cannot articulate but respond to nonetheless. Audrey found me one more time before she left. She had spoken to perhaps 7 people over the course of an hour and managed to be the most significant person in the room without saying anything that could not be repeated in polite company. "I'll be in touch about the Charleston property," she said. "We'll need a decision on the anchor tenant by the end of the month." "I'll call you Friday," I said. She nodded. She looked at me for a moment and said, very quietly, "You've been patient." "Yes," I said. She left. The room rearranged itself around her absence the way rooms do when someone significant departs, not dramatically but perceptibly. Conversations restarted. Ice shifted in glasses, but the quality of attention in the space had changed, and I could feel it in the way people moved around me now, a slight recalibration in proximity and eye contact, the social physics adjusting to accommodate new information. My Aunt Helen found me near the coat rack. "Who was that woman?" she asked with the careful casualness of someone who had already asked someone else the same question. "A business partner," I said. "She seemed to know you very well." "We've worked together for several years," I said. She processed this. "What kind of work?" I told her simply and precisely. "What kind of work?" And I watched her face move through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, reappraisal, something that edged toward embarrassment. She had been at the party when my father made the property management comment. I had seen her smile at it. "I had no idea," she said. "Most people here didn't," I said. "My brother found me 20 minutes later." He was holding his beer differently now, with less confidence in the grip, and his eyes had the slightly unfocused quality of someone who has been trying to reassemble a picture that has come apart. "Who is Audrey Vance?" he said. "She's one of the most respected private real estate brokers on the East Coast," I said. "She specializes in transactions over 20 million. She's brokered 14 deals in the last 3 years that never appeared on any public listing." He stared at me. "And she's your partner?" "Colleague," I said. "On some things, partner." He looked at the space where she had been standing and then back at me. "Why didn't you ever?" he started. "Why didn't I ever what?" I said. He didn't finish the sentence. He probably couldn't find the end of it. "Why didn't you ever tell us? Why didn't you ever correct us? Why did you let us spend years making you smaller than you were?" The answer to all of those was the same, and he was smart enough to arrive at it on his own. Eventually, if he ever spent real time thinking about it, he said, "I'm sorry I didn't call to invite you." I looked at him. "Yes," I said, "you should be." I said it without anger. That was the thing he did not seem to expect, that I wasn't angry. I had moved past anger years ago into something quieter and more durable. Anger required me to keep the injury fresh. I had stopped doing that. My father was standing near the staircase when I collected my coat. I took a slightly longer route to get there so that the path would take me close to where he stood. He watched me coming, and the expression on his face was not the one I had been waiting 30 years to see. It was not an apology or a recognition or a moment of late clarity. It was something smaller and more complicated than any of those things, a kind of bewilderment, like a man who has been working a math problem the same way for decades and has just discovered that the answer has never been what he thought. "Lily," he said. I stopped. He looked at me with the eyes of a man who had organized his entire understanding of his family around a framework that had just been dismantled in front of an audience he cared about. He opened his mouth, and whatever was there was not enough. He knew it before he tried. "Drive safe," he said. I told him I would. I let myself out of my brother's house at 11:15, walked down the stone driveway to the rented Camry, got in, and sat for a moment in the dark before starting the engine. The night was cold in the way October nights in Westchester are cold, clear and sharp. The sky the kind of black you only get when you're far enough from the city. I could hear music still coming from inside the house, the low murmur of a party winding down. My phone showed 2 texts. One was from Dana, Whitmore signed. Option B. I know it's not what we wanted, but it's solid. Celebrate Friday. The other was from a number I didn't recognize immediately. And then I did. My mother's cell, not the line she usually texted from. "Lily, when you have a chance, I think we should talk." I sat with both messages for a long moment. Then I put the car in reverse, backed out of the driveway and drove south on the parkway toward Philadelphia, toward my life, toward the version of myself I had built in the years when my family had been too busy praising my brother to notice what I was doing. The lights of Westchester fell away behind me. The road opened up ahead. I had not won anything tonight by proving something. I had won by having nothing left to prove. The difference between those two things had taken me 30 years to learn, and it was, I had decided, exactly worth the time it had taken. I have thought a lot about what my father said when I was leaving that night. Drive safe. 2 words. The whole evening, the speech he gave where he didn't mention my name, the way he introduced me to his colleagues as our other one, the years of small erasures stacked on top of each other like unpaid debts, and what he found at the end of it was drive safe. For a long time I would have needed more than that. I would have needed him to say something that acknowledged what had just happened, something that cracked the surface of the story he had been telling about me for 30 years. But I have learned, slowly and at some cost, that what people are capable of giving you is not always what you are owed, and waiting for those 2 things to match will hollow you out if you let it. What I know now is this: the life I built was built in the absence of their belief in me, not because of it. My father's refusal to loan me money when I was 28 sent me back to a 1-bedroom apartment in South Philly, where I spent 8 months restructuring my approach until I found something that worked without his help. That restructuring became the foundation of everything I have now. I did not know that at the time. At the time, I was just angry and tired and trying to figure out how to move forward with fewer resources than I'd asked for. But the thing about being denied what you need is that it forces you to find out what you actually have. And I had more than either of us knew. That is the part I could not have told my father, even if the words had been available. That his low opinion of me had been, in a very specific and unintentional way, one of the most useful things he ever gave me. Not because diminishment is good for people. It isn't. It leaves marks. I still catch myself sometimes in a room full of people who know exactly what I do, feeling the old reflex to make myself smaller, to qualify, to deflect. That doesn't go away clean, but the refusal to be comfortable in that smallness, that came from somewhere, and some of it came from watching my father pour his confidence into my brother and having to figure out where to get mine. Audrey told me once that the most dangerous thing in any negotiation is the person who has nothing left to prove. I thought about that on the drive home from Westchester. I thought about the way she had moved through that party, not trying to impress anyone, not performing anything, just existing with the full weight of what she had actually built. And I thought about how long it had taken me to learn to do the same thing. What happened at my brother's housewarming was not a victory. I didn't go there to win anything. I went because my mother texted me a forwarded invitation, and some part of me still showed up when family called, even the parts of family that had long since stopped showing up for me. What happened was just the truth, arriving at a time and in a form my father couldn't control or redirect. The truth has a way of doing that. Not dramatically, not on schedule, but eventually. The things you build in silence don't stay silent forever, and the people who spent years defining you in your absence eventually have to share the room with who you actually became. I celebrated the Whitmore deal with Dana on Friday over Thai food on Passyunk Avenue. She told me option B was actually cleaner than option A would have been. I told her she was probably right. We split the check. That was enough. That has always been enough.